you will improve.
Yes.
And I always see you as that mama bear that loves, cares, and protect, and also, hey, go for it.
Yes.
Try, give it a try. Work hard, focused, and you will go for it.
So, Nestor, you know, most of my life has been about advocating and fighting for our people, really, for us to have a place at the table. And not just a place, but to also lead at that table. So to me, equity is including other people at that table and not letting anyone dominate at that table. So, you know, we all know that there's a difference between equal and equity, right? We want to make sure we get what we deserve and that we get the same opportunities or opportunities that will complement who we are as people. And that means talking to people about what that means for them. So when we've talked about all these things about family and community, I'm really glad you asked about equity, because to me, as a principal, as a district leader, both of us, we need to make sure that we know what our families want to understand what is equity to them too. And that we're not making decisions about what that is for them, so that when we're at those tables with them, or maybe it's them and it's not us anymore, or maybe it's them. Some of your mothers here, I've seen them. Some of the parents, they are the leaders at those tables. They are amazing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you know that this school was almost taken over to become a charter school, and they fought like heck and said, no, district, you're not going to turn us into a charter school. We are CMS, and we are a bilingual school. We're dual language school, and back off. And the district backed off. So to me, equity is including voices like the parents who were here and saying, absolutely, this is your school, this is your community, and we're here to honor that. So when we have a table of equity, what I want to make sure is people understand on that is it's not just for one color of group. It's for all of us. To me, that's equity, that we all get an opportunity in our own voice to say what we need, and someone isn't telling us what that is.
I cannot tell you how honored I am. Every time I'm with you, I just feel super welcome, and you bring this energy of family and love and care. And just as you show up in the office, the secretaries got excited to see you. We just found a social worker who remembers you from when you were at North High School. That is, I mean, you walk through life, yes, and people remember you. And every single time I have had that experience with you is a memory of gratitude.
Oh, so thank you, Nestor. I'm so honored to have just had the opportunity to meet so many amazing people. And the fact that they remember me is very humbling.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm sure that it also fills your bucket.
Yes. Yes.
It keeps you going.
It does.
You just did the math, and you've been in DPS or in this career for 44 years.
Yes.
And you still have the energy and the love and the care and the las ganas
sí,
de seguir impactando a la comunidad. Sí. It makes me curious. It makes me wonder to know how these days are going for you. What's filling up your calendar? What's keeping you busy? What are you engaged on these days?
Well, you know, Nestor, I retired in 2017. And I never really retired. I came back a month later intentionally to continue to work in Denver Public Schools and to help coach people for equity. It's called Coaching for Equitable Practice. And I've always thought, you know, when I was a principal and we'd have amazing teachers retire after 30, 40 years in their career, and I always said, hey, gosh, you know, I want them to still be with us, that experience, that cariño, that care, that love, a passion for the work. And so I thought to myself, you know, I'm not ready to retire, whatever that means. I want to continue to contribute. And so I want to do it in a meaningful way. And that's why I worked with some colleagues in DPS to continue to work and to coach central office leaders initially, with the goal originally to then coach principals to coach for equitable practice, to really look at data and people and our kids and our community to find out what we could do differently, what we could do better, how we could work more effectively to really make a difference, to make the kind of change and the academic gains as well as help our families and our students be successful. That's really was very interesting to me. And then from there, I've moved on to other things. Now you ask what's filling my calendar. A few things, always my family first. That's very, very important to me because I can't just say it. I've got to do it and mean it. And so that's important, especially in leadership. Because if we're feeling great, then what we do and how we contribute continues to be strong. If we're not feeling great or proud of how we're working with our family, then that also impacts our work. So it's important that our family and our relationships there be strong. So that's number one. The other thing that's filling my bucket lately is I'm the new ombuds person for the Denver Public School, the new ombuds. And that's a new role. It started initially by my very loving colleague, Dr. Sharon Bailey, who passed last December. And what that is, I didn't know what it was. And I said, well, what's an ombuds? And my friend
that was my question too. I wonder what that means.
Yeah. And I learned that it is really a person who is neutral, confidential, independent, and impartial, and I am focused on employees. So my whole life I've been focused on kids and adults as a principal and central office leader. But this is really focused on employees. Any employee in Denver Public Schools can make an appointment to see me and myself or my colleague, Dr. Antoinette Hudson, and I'm growing the office already, and talk about any issues that they may feel concerned about. They're not sure where to go. They're not sure what to do. Something has happened that it doesn't feel right, and they could come and talk about those things. And that's what I'm doing now, and that's pretty much filling my calendar, getting that rolling out to have a full opening on September 1st of this year, 2022.
Wow. So you have to make sure that you reach or that you are available for those people that reached out and try to have an impartial approach to concerns or
Yes.
things that they want to solve.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what's really important. And you said that things that they want to solve, that's the key, is that we don't give recommendations, because some people want to say, well, what would you do? Some people do ask me that. And I say, well, let's talk about what your options are. So based on whatever the circumstances are, we're able to problem solve or think about some really creative or different options routes that they could go through, and the person gets to decide, not me. So I'm not holding them accountable. I'm not their supervisor. In fact, their supervisors, or nobody even knows that they came. It's purely confidential. But then they leave with some options. Or if they want me to help them coach, maybe they want to say something to someone in a positive way, or to say, there's something you've been doing that it's really bothering me, but they don't know how to say it. I can practice with them their conversation.
Wow. That's very useful, very practical as well, especially if someone comes to you and it is the first time that they're seeking for that support.
Yes.
They might walk away with skills they didn't have before in order to maybe continue to solve or navigate the challenge they might be going through.
Yes. And the most important thing, Nestor, I have found is that people just want someone to listen. So just a place where someone can go, and I'm pretty much quiet. I listen, and I ask a few questions to make sure I understand. And then that really helps me help them come up with some options that they can think about that really fit for them.
Wow. One of the things I love about you, and I make a connection with Cesar Cedillo, I recorded an episode with him last week. It's the one thing that you both have in common is your authentic leadership. When I asked you what fills your bucket, you went straight to family. Yes. You're like, family is my number one thing that keeps me busy and keeps me going. And the second thing is in your new capacity, just putting people's needs first, and you as a mediator. Yes. That's you. And I love that about all leaders. When they talk about the things they do and that keeps them busy, it goes straight to their identity. Like, my family, serving others, taking care of what they need and how I can help them. That is so beautiful and so authentic. And I think as we build a new vision for education and for leadership, that authentic leadership is always something I want to highlight in others. So,
thank you. You made me think of something when you said that. This community, the CMS community, the Southwest Denver community, specifically here over off of Mississippi and Federal area, where I was raised most of my life. When you talk about community and family, I can't separate it. It's the same to me. And so, for example, you talk about giving, authentic leadership. and being authentic. And I think of my brother, Pascual LeDoux Jr., who we have a school over here named after him.
Yeah, walking distance.
Yes, walking distance. Your youngest children go there here.
Both of them.
Yeah, and then they come here to this school.
Yep.
And hopefully my granddaughter will go there too.
Yes.
And so I think about how he gave so much that he died helping somebody on the side of the road fix a flat tire. And he didn't want to die, of course, but he cared so much that he stopped, pulled over, and helped this family that had a flat tire, and he knew how to fix tires. He was a teacher, but he also knew how to do mechanic stuff. And I think about, and we learned it from our parents. So my parents were very giving and very loving and volunteered for, in those days, the Boy Scouts kind of thing, and also for the veterans of foreign wars. My parents were very active in volunteering. So I saw growing up my life. And I want to say, when you talk about family, it's hard to separate that because they did it. So they modeled for me, I did it. And my goal, too, is that my daughters do that, my 2 daughters, and that the people that I work with, the teachers and people around us, we all contribute back to our communities, because that continues the semillas growing.
100%. And when I was looking at your biography, and I mean, you have had such a productive career in education and leadership, so many things. And it all comes down to that childhood, mom and dad showing you the ropes, modeling the way to you, specifically around service, but also about non-compliance. Yes. I remember reading in 6th grade, you were already just causing trouble.
Yes, I was. Good trouble.
You were already trying to figure out, okay, things might not be working for us, for the Latinos. So I think if you could maybe spend a little bit of time elaborating what did home life meant to you and what it looked like for you when you were a kiddo, and then how that evolved into the 6th grade girl that walked out of, and then the high school experience.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Thank you, Nestor. Yeah. So a few things really impacted me growing up. Here, when I was going to Godsman Elementary, I remember one time I had certificates for good attendance. I was always at school. I loved school. I remember one time I had a doctor's appointment, and I came back to school, and my friends came up to me and said, Darlene, our teacher said that you have olive skin. And I said, olive? All I could think of was black olives or green olives, right? In those days, we only had those 2 colors. Oh, yeah. We didn't have all the colors like we have now, all the different types of olives. Uh-huh. And I thought, well, did he say I have green skin or black skin? I wasn't sure. So I went up to him, and I confronted him, and I said, and I won't say his name, but I said, teacher, I was in 5th grade then, and
Godsman
Elementary. And he said, I explained what happened, and I said, why did you say I have olive skin? And he said, well, we were learning about social studies and about the Mediterranean and about people from Spain and Italy and Europe. And someone wanted an example, and I said, yeah, Darlene has olive skin. And I'd never heard of that before, But for a teacher to do that in front of all the students, and for me not to be there, and even if I had been there, I would have been like perplexed, like, what's that? So that, just the fact that I was able to ask that question to an adult in a position of power, but in a respectful way. I did confront him. I didn't yell at him, but I said, well, tell me what happened. So another funny thing happened. That wasn't funny, but another interesting thing happened at Godsman. And you're going to laugh about this. Those were starting the protest days. Vietnam, a lot of things happening. And I organized all the kids to protest because we wanted a longer recess.
Okay.
So we went out on the playground. We wouldn't go back in. And you remember, I was a quote-unquote good kid. I got pretty good grades, et cetera. And finally, we negotiated, and they let us have like 5 or 10 more minutes of recess. But what I think, though, you're talking about, the one that really had impacted my life in leadership, is I was at Rischel over here, Rischel Junior High, Rischel Middle School, which is now MSLA, I believe.
Yes, by Valverde.
Yes, by Valverde, yes. I was a student there, and I will never forget how, in those days, there were more Anglos in this neighborhood than Chicanos, Mexicanos. And I remember going to school and seeing the differences. More so, I was starting to see them when the olive skin and all those things were happening, and how people would talk to my mother, who had a strong Spanish accent from New Mexico. I would Mexican accent. I would hear that, and I was starting to put things together. Like, I am different. Of course, we eat different food. My parents speak Spanish. I didn't grow up speaking Spanish. They wanted to protect us from being discriminated against. So I've still continued to learn. But what happened at Rishel was something. There were all my friends who I'd grown up with through Godsman all the way to Rishel, and I noticed there were some differences in, especially some of our Spanish-speaking kids in those days weren't provided some of the services that they needed to really understand the content of the instruction, what they were learning. And I also noticed there were no teachers, very few, just one, who looked like me, who was Latino Mexicano. And so when I heard of the walkouts on 1969, it was March 20th, 1969, my birthday, as a matter of fact. I was 13 years old. And in those days, remember, Nestor, there was no cell phone or even pagers or anything to communicate, right?
Yeah.
It was just on the wall phones, kind of. And we all organized. We had heard about the walkouts that had happened at West High School, and that we all needed to join the next day and meet everybody downtown. And I remember a group of us getting together and deciding to walk out. And imagine, I was 13 years old. I had never been downtown that I could remember. And we all walked out. We all knew at 9 o'clock we had to walk out. And it was, the reason was important. I didn't walk out just to walk out. I didn't want to get in trouble. I was a good kid. Mm-hmm. I was in student council. I was elected by my peers to be in student council. But what was important, though, was there were no teachers that looked like me. I never saw us in the books, ever. I didn't ever learn of any of our history. My friends who spoke Spanish were not getting the services they needed, or instruction in Spanish, or even English language development. They got nothing. They were just completely ignored, set by themselves, until some of us came over and would talk with them. I was learning Spanish then, trying to help out. And so I walked out and I hitchhiked downtown. Now that was scared too. I'd never hitchhiked.
Oh gosh! But
a group of us were together, and cars would pick us up, and we all went downtown. And then I remember being down there watching all the activities happening. Everybody went to the Crusade for Justice. That was where Corky and the organization, the Crusade for Justice, was. And I remember going down there, and they fed us, and we attended some classes about Chicano history, and there was organizing going on. Yeah.
So that day you walked out, and by the time you show up there was a setup, there was a system. People were organized to first educate you a little bit about your own history.
Yes.
Okay, so probably the people who took you in the car, they probably knew what was going on.
Well, I don't know. They just we asked where we could get off. And you remember, there's no GPS in those days either. So we had to find our way to the Crusade for Justice, which is off of Colfax, by the Capitol downtown, a little further down. It was there before. Mm-hmm. And we found our way. I don't know how we did it, actually, at 13-year-olds. But it was really a powerful experience. And when I saw all the Chicanos downtown, this was a big part of the historical part of the Chicano movement. When I saw everybody downtown, and I knew that we had to support the West High students who had walked out, and I agreed with all the reasons that they walked out. They were being discriminated against by a teacher there who would intentionally say their last names incorrectly. So Martinez would be Martinez, or Gallegos, and the kids would say, "I'm Gallegos," and he'd say, "Well, whatever, you Gallego," whatever. I mean, intentionally, and then make fun of their parents, what they ate at home. And when we heard that, we heard about it. It was bad enough that we heard all these things, and to get everybody across the city, kids from East High School, kids from Manual High School, and I think a lot of people just didn't know that a lot of us from junior high also walked out. And I'm thankful to the people who led that movement to help me better understand who I am, my community, my people, my family.
Wow. That pretty much shaped your identity as well.
Yes, that was significant.
It also looks like you were already a leader. In 5th grade, you were already getting people together, trying to advocate for things.
Yes.
At what point did you realize, I think I have this in me. I think I have this gift or this blessing of being able to gather people and trying to think beyond the situations, beyond the challenges. Was it something that always came naturally, or at some point you were like, I think I might have this gift?
Well, that's an amazing question. I think when I finally really owned it, Nestor, so there's a difference between knowing when you can do it. Like it always came out of me, this passion, this need to support my people, to advocate for my people or people that have less than I did, to always help. Not to be a savior, but to work with people to do that. That's important. I'm not a savior, you know. I think it really happened when I was getting my master's degree and I was a teacher. And one of my professors who was Chicano said, you need to be a principal. And because, you know, I continued my activism, my Chicano activism throughout, ever since I walked out, all the way through high school, all the way through college, continued to be active in the movement. But I guess I really realized that I could be a quote-unquote designated leader, I should say.
There you go. That's a great way
versus
to say it.
People appoint me, say, hey, you need to, people in my groups would say, Darlene, you go tell them. And I'd say, I'll go tell them. I was never shy about that.
No problem.
But I didn't look at it as leader, you know, just that it needed to be done, let's do it. Until I got to that master's degree program, and a professor said, Darlene, you need to be a principal. And I went, I had never thought of it prior to that.
Huh. I love what you said about you're not a savior. You like to empower people. And that's how I always seen you. Like you are able to work with people, and then I think you have also the ability to see in people their potential.
Yes.
And you're very encouraging. Like you can go for it. Go give it a try. You're doing great. This is what you are doing well now. I think if you continue, you will improve.
Yes.
And I always see you as that mama bear that loves, cares, and protect, and also, hey, go for it.
Yes.
Try, give it a try. Work hard, focused, and you will go for it. So.
Yes. You know, Nestor, I have a confession on that. It's true. That's absolutely true what you say. I always see that, and I'm also very intuitive. I have this gift within me that it's amazing how there's so often I see someone say, wow, they're going to really be big. And even if they're not, even if people are struggling, I think it's important to be supportive. But one of the things that I think really helps is believing positively in people versus the negative things. You know, none of us can do everything perfectly, but a lot of us can do a lot of things really well. And I think just building on those strengths versus always saying as a people, and sometimes we're our worst enemy. Sometimes I was my worst enemy. I would say, Darlene, you're not strong enough. You could be better at this. You could be better at that. And then I would say, you know what? But here's some things you really do well, Darlene. It's like that self-talk. You know, you can motivate, you can encourage, you can sponsor, you can support, you can come up with another way to do something that no one else has thought of. And I would think of the things I can do, knowing that I still had to learn, always a learner, versus the things I couldn't do, because sometimes our people are meant to be, some people try to keep us in a certain place, and we can't listen to that. We have to say, no, we can do this and this and this, and this can lead to that. And always have that optimism, that hopefulness, to be better, to do better, to help others as we do that, and help bring others with us. So we're not getting better and leaving anybody behind. We raise up the whole community together.
Gosh, that's leadership. That's what it is. That's true, pure leadership. The power of believing in people and treating people as what they can be. Like being able to look one step ahead of what they are and seeing their potential, what they can be. That is so powerful. I have a silly question. What is the origin of your last name? Where is it from?
That's a good question. So LeDoux, or LeDouxes, if you're from New Mexico.
LeDouxes, okay.
But it's LeDoux, and it's a French name. And my dad was a LeDoux, or LeDoux, as they say. We come from French fur trappers in Canada who came through the Rocky Mountains and settled in northern New Mexico. So I'm one of those traditional New Mexicans that has the Spanish, the indigenous, and the Anglo is the French in this case. And so, but my mother's side is Maestas, and the historical part there is again from New Mexico, but from Spain through Mexico, through Zacatecas, to the mountains of northern New Mexico, where we have a canyon named Maestas Canyon after our family. So we're that combination of all amazing people. And so I always kept my name, not because I liked that fact that just because sometimes I wondered, well, why wasn't I Gallegos or Garcia or something? I always wondered that, or Maestas, why wasn't I that? But you have to be proud of who you are, and so I always embrace that. I'm LeDoux, and that's my family. That's who I am, and I'm not embarrassed about that. And I'm Maestra también, and my husband's a Renteria, and I'm Renteria from that. So there you go.
And your husband is also from the New Mexico area, or you met
he's
here?
from Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
I met my husband in college.
Oh,
Yes,
nice.
and when I met him in college, I remember saying when I found out he was from Wichita, Kansas, which I didn't know anybody from there yet, having lived my whole life in Denver, I said, "There's Chicanos in Wichita, Kansas?" He said, "Yes, the railroad tracks from Mexico, building the tracks, and also the meat packing plants."
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So it is pretty cool that even though he grew up in a different environment, you culturally have the same connection.
We do.
And it makes me wonder, at some point in your childhood and maybe early teenagers, you realized that you were a Chicana?
Oh, yes.
Was that a slow realization, or?
It was probably starting in elementary when I was one of the youngest members of it was called the Latin American Student Club. We didn't know what to call ourselves then, Nestor.
I bet.
We didn't, because my parents always said we were Spanish because of our New Mexico Spanish, Mexicano roots. They didn't, for some reason it was Spanish in their mind. I know it was Spanish and Mexican and indigenous. And, but when I went to the Latin American Student Club and I was the youngest kid, I happened to find out, I don't know how I found out, to tell you the truth, but all the other kids in it were in high school. And we had a retreat in the mountains, and the professor told my parents that she would take care of me. Fernie Bacamor at the time it was at UCD. And it might have been community college because she went from community college to UCD. Anyway, she sponsored it. And I was the youngest kid. They had high school kids, so I started learning a lot from them too, because that was in the days of the boycotting the lettuce, boycotting the grapes, and
I have no idea about that.
Yes, that was the movement was Cesar Chavez.
Okay,
that's the whole farm worker movement when they organized and they started their own union in the Salinas Valley.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yes, and so that was the whole.
Powerful.
And I remember that especially because we had lettuce served for lunch. Salad, and the students started throwing it, and I was so shocked because I thought, oh my gosh, they're throwing the salad. But I didn't know that at the time. I did learn then that was being boycotted because of the farm workers trying to support the farm workers. And so they were saying, how could you do this? How could you give a salad when we're supporting the farm workers union? Well, of course the workers didn't know that. They're in the cafeteria. But that all helped me understand more about what was happening in the world, in the world of the United States, and the movement and the farm worker movement. And then I became supportive of that, of course, and actually started picketing. We used to have an Albertsons over here on Federal, right here where the clinic is, the Peña Clinic. Yeah. There was an Albertsons back there.
Okay.
And I remember literally standing there in the picket line, asking people not, as a kid, I didn't live far, I could walk to there. As a kid, asking people not to buy grapes and not to buy lettuce.
Wow. That's a lot of activity, a lot of visioning, a lot of awareness of where the social, I guess, discrimination in this area of the country and as a country overall. I was learning about Ruby Bridges a little bit deeper a few months ago, and I think she's 67 years old. She's alive.
She's alive, yeah.
The people who were booing her are, I would assume, are also still alive. Like
Isn't
the
that
history,
something?
it blew my mind because I saw the pictures of her in black and white, and I've been in the U.S. for 13 years, and there's a lot of the history of this country that I need to learn. But I was very passionate about that topic, and I was looking on her about her on Wikipedia, and she's 67. Her kids are probably my age.
Wow.
They are alive, and they have to look back at their past and remember the people who was saying the things they were saying to them, and so painful. It's a history that we have to be very mature and very, I guess, forgiving, and so many difficult things that people like you who grew up here that belong to a different culture have to face and be warriors and I'm just grateful that you had that vision since a kiddo.
Thank you. Well, also I want you to know that we also have to be allies and co-conspirators with our African-American Black brothers and sisters and our Indigenous brothers and sisters and our Asian brothers and sisters. But I really hope, Nestor, that our kids all kids learn about that. That's why it's important, you as a principal, other people as teachers, other people as central office leaders in this district and others. What have we changed? You say the woman is 67, right? Ruby Bridges is 67.
She's 67.
And she's close to my age. So how do we actually make sure that we learn from that and that we have a rich culture and history in the United States and that our kids get access to that? That's our responsibility, isn't it?
100% our responsibility. She was born on September 8th, 1954.
Yes.
It is our responsibility. It's important to look back at history and learn from it and make sure that our kids, whether their race, their background, their families, where they're coming from, to have a shot at building a better world and bring more justice.
Yes. And Nestor, I kind of want to talk about that. I want it to be better than a shot. I want them to have the best opportunities. Because so often, if we just have a shot and we miss that point in time, and we have got to have that opportunity where our students, you've heard this, instead of our high school kids saying, well, which college? I'm going to college. It's which college are you going to? Or which career are you interested in? And that's the opportunity, is fully opening that window where the vista is huge. They can see all these things and see all these options. So that means it's up to us at the elementary levels, the preschool levels, at birth, until that preschool level, to help the students, whether it be through their parents, whether it be through other social economic opportunities for their families. That's why we need to connect the family to the student, because it's all that circle of life where kids start seeing things when it's around them. They start seeing what's possible when they see other people who might have that, or somebody else who they know or they've read about it. That's opening that door, that window to our students and their families.
I really love you bring that up, because it also opens my horizon and the way I look at it. It's just not just a shot. It's just not that a 10-second window open and then you shoot at an opportunity. Is that we create the conditions throughout an entire generation of opportunities, skills development, grit, character development as well.
And Nestor, I know you're doing that. I know you and what you do. I mean, even the fact that you're doing this podcast, think about this. You're doing this at CMS, in this building. It's going beyond. But what about at the national level, at the international level, with what you know, what you do, your talents?
Yeah, I am dedicating the rest of my life to unpack these things. If this is the only thing I get to do while I'm alive, I will greatly and gratefully do it, because I do know that it's more than a shot. It's creating the conditions. It's bringing that dignity to every single kiddo. I hate just to see that a zip code and a dysfunctional family environment will create the conditions for you to be screwed for the rest of your life. And I refuse to believe that is the way it's supposed to be. I refuse to believe that, well, you were born like that, so you pulled yourself by your bootstraps and figure it out. I did, so now you have to. There is an element of self-agency, of course. There is an element of you have to work hard, but also we owe it to each other to be more human and to develop the condition for that to happen. And that's why I also want this podcast to be an opportunity for leaders like you, for people who have that fire in their hearts to come up and share their stories and just speak out about the things that they have experienced in life that allows them to tilt the balance a little bit towards the positive side.
Yes.
I think we need to, and it gets me really excited to talk about developing that collective wisdom. I just cannot imagine all the people that might be listening to you and be like super excited, inspired, and start making connections about their own leadership. So that really excites me. And that makes me wonder about a little bit more about your story, because up until last couple of years, I always spoken to you mostly in Spanish, and your Spanish is just fabulous. Like you, but now in this conversation, I'm learning that at the beginning, you probably were not encouraged speak as much Spanish. So there has to be a growth process between when you were a kiddo and asked not to use it as much, and now you're using it with pride,
Yes.
with proficiency, talking to
Thank
my
you.
families, to myself.
Thank you.
I enjoy speaking Spanish more than English because I'm more
I
proficient.
love your Spanish. It's so beautiful, Nestor.
Thank you. So when do you
Well,
learn
it's your
it?
corazón, you know, it's who you are.
Yeah.
And I respect that so much. And I wish I spoke as beautifully as you in Spanish.
Oh, thank you.
So the question again?
Where do you learn your Spanish? Where do you
Okay.
perfect it?
So I can speak Spanish really
Let me
well.
have I would like to take notes on that.
Sure.
Please. Thank you.
I can speak Spanish well, Nestor, but I don't always feel like I'm fully bilingual, fully proficient.
Okay.
Because some of the academic words especially, I can't quite remember or don't know because I wasn't taught that. So just remember, my parents are from northern New Mexico. We speak New Mexico Spanish, which to me is de la gente, no?
Claro.
It's very, it's beautiful. It's archaic, some of our words. Ancina instead of asina or así. So there's certain words my parents would say that when I tried to learn Spanish in school, now it wasn't that they weren't proud. They were very proud of who we were and who we are. But they were discouraged. They were not taught to, they were discriminated against. So that taught them to, I don't want my kids to be hurt or harmed. So that we're going to teach them in English. So my mother said all her prayers in Spanish. And she worked in the Denver Public Schools. And I remember having friends come over and we were playing. Me and my friends would be playing and my mom would say, okay, get ready, go wash your hands, let's get ready to eat. And my friends would say, what did your mom say? And I'd say, she said, get ready to eat. And they'd say, well, she just spoke Spanish. I said, no, that was English. So she had an accent, so people thought she spoke Spanish. So I learned because I wanted to understand what my parents were saying. When all of our adults would get together in the family, they'd all speak Spanish. They would laugh. They would have a great time. And we wouldn't be able to understand them. And they weren't trying to do that. That was their native, comfortable language. And so they just immediately started speaking Spanish. My grandparents, my grandmother only spoke Spanish. My grandmothers, both of them, in New Mexico. So can you imagine as a kid not being able to communicate with your grandmother? And so that was so painful for me because I loved my grandmothers. And I would speak as much as I could to them in English, and they would try to speak to me in Spanish, and we would try to speak back and forth, and I'd learn a few words. They'd learn a few words. But I thought, no, I'm not going to live like that. I'm going to learn Spanish so I could talk to my grandmothers. And so I started learning Spanish in the Denver Public Schools. They used to teach it on TV. There used to be a teacher, Mr. Manzanares, and Felicia Manzanares' grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And he would get on the TV, and all the kids in the district, all the teachers would turn it on. I don't know if it was 4th or 5th grade. I don't remember the grade. That was our Spanish lesson. TPS used to have its own media center, and they would turn on the TV, and all the kids would listen to, hello, my name is Mr. Manzanares. And he'd start speaking the Spanish, and we would all, and I thought, I love Mr. Manzanares because he started to teach me Spanish. And then I started asking my mom more and more, and she started teaching me more. And then, of course, in middle school, junior high, I learned Spanish. And then high school, I didn't take as much, but then I started being very interested and started going to just learning more on my own through my family. And then in college, started learning Spanish. I was a bilingual teacher. One of my first career, the very first thing I did, and I took one of the very first. I was one of the first certified bilingual teachers in the state. Now there were many with me, but we were some of the first. When we took the New Mexico 4 Skills exam, that was the exam in the day to prove that you're bilingual. It was adopted by the State Board of Education for CDE. Yeah. And I remember taking that, and of course I knew that one because that was what my family spoke, the New Mexico Spanish. That's the one I had been growing up and hearing. So I passed that one. Gracias a Dios that I passed that one, and I've continued to learn and that was part of my plan, Nestor, because if I was going to serve our community in Denver, I needed to speak Spanish. I needed to understand. I needed to be able to communicate with the students and their parents. And that's why I continue to learn.
You brought up something really powerful, and it is actually at the core of what I do here at CMS, because we are a dual language school.
Yes.
And you just said it beautifully. I needed to learn Spanish or master my Spanish because that's how I talk to my abuelita, mi mamá. We as a family, when we get together, we speak in Spanish. And what I tell all my teachers and my parents and even my colleagues who are not from a dual language school or background is that Spanish is not only the language, it's also your identity.
Yes.
When I speak in Spanish to people or to my family back in Venezuela, there is a part of me, there is a part of who I am that doesn't come through when I speak in English. And I tell my families, by having your kids grow bilingual, keeping their roots, their native language, you're also giving them an opportunity to remain authentic and true to who they are. Learning a language comes with forging an identity.
Yes.
And when you become bilingual, I tell my kids in kinder continuation, my tiny little guys, and little Miss Angelitos,
Sí.
or the CMS angels, I tell them, you're getting a superpower. You are continuing into first grade today, and you're getting the superpower of being bilingual because you get to communicate with the world without losing who you are.
Yes. Gracias a Dios.
Gracias a Dios.
Sí.
And that's something that we learn from the Chicano movement and any other movement where we try to assimilate or one culture takes over the other. And I think if we rescue, honor, and also celebrate that piece of our identity that manifests through a language, through art,
Yes.
through our foods, through our costumes, through our dances, it's just a way to tell our kiddos, there is nothing wrong with you. There's everything to be beautiful with you, and we want to cherish you. So that's so cool.
Well, I love always what you're doing here. This school is the heartbeat of the community, Nestor. And, you know, I drive around here all the time. I go to the carnicerias. This is my home area around here. And to see what you are doing and your leadership here and your passion and your dedication. And I will always remember when you were applying for this position and I was the instructional superintendent. I was so thrilled when I knew that you were an applicant and supported you 1,000%, but I had to be neutral, right?
Yeah.
During the process.
Yeah.
And it was like...
I barely ever saw you when I was applying.
I was behind the scenes, and we were just making sure that, you know, we had good, strong candidates, and we did. And I did not have a voting. I mean, I was thrilled. I was praying. I was hoping. And because, you know, we had good candidates. I'm not at all putting anybody anywhere here other than saying how thrilled knowing you and your friendship with my daughter and how much she respects you and how much your colleagues respect you. I thought, oh my goodness, for Nestor to be here, this is just going to be such an amazing opportunity for this entire community.
Yeah. One really cool treat that I found out after I got the principal job is many of my students, because I was a Spanish teacher at Lincoln High School, which is over here, like 10 years ago, many of my students who were my actual students in my classroom became parents, and now they bring their kids here.
Oh, what an honor.
It is super humbling. And also a reminder that I'm getting old. But they bring their kids. They're Mr. Bravo, or they call me Bravo. Hey, Bravo. I bring in my kids, and they do it so happily, and they trust their little babies to me, and they as a family come to me and openly just let me share my vision for what I think is the right thing for their kids and their families. Some of those kids as well, who were my students, also became my teachers.
Wow.
So now I have a teacher who was my student, and now she's my child's teacher.
That's the biggest compliment, Nestor.
It is a great compliment.
And the fact that your students are bringing their children here and they trust you.
Mm-hmm. And remember me with appreciation and love, and that takes me back to that authentic leadership piece. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I always try to share with my teachers. Be who you are, be loving, be caring, because he pays back. And also it makes your life more meaningful, I think, because when people know what you're up to, when people know what you're about, they will trust you. It's not just because of what you say, because of what you do, which is kind of your insignia, you know, like show people.
So, Nestor, what do you do as a leader to strengthen that trust, to evoke that trust so that your families, everybody around here, whether they know you or not, really knows that this is the right place for them and their child? What is it that you do as a leader?
I share with my families my own personal story, and I make it clear that I am also an immigrant and that I had to learn English, and it is painful. And when you come here, there is a system that give people a pathway to success. And if you don't grow as part of that system, you have to work twice as hard. And I have acquired the tools as a second language learner, and also as an immigrant. I have acquired some tools that allowed me to become a principal and to serve the community. Many of those tools are around our values, about our self-agency, but also the network of people who love each other and give each other as many as opportunities as we need. So when families come, especially the ones who just came to the U.S. 2 weeks ago from Guatemala or from Mexico, and they're like, I don't even know how to pay rent.
Yes.
Or, gosh, what are the supply list? What do we need here? How do I walk to school because I don't have a car yet?
Yes.
I fortunately have been able to be like, okay, I know this organization, I know this person, I have a dean of culture, let's talk a little bit. And then they start feeling that the school and my leadership is not only to get a test score or turn kids into just a data point. It's more about, well, you came here, you're starting your life from zero, and I remember how hard it was for me. Let's see how we can figure this out. And then parents get that sense of, okay, I think I'm at the right place. And then the word of mouth continues to go. Many of my families don't have Facebook or or logging into a school website. They just find each other in la carnicería or in la panadería or at the grocery store in line, and they just talk to each other. And I also know that I'm not perfect. So sometimes when I make mistakes or when I don't communicate properly, especially when I'm super busy and don't have the resources to be as transparent as I can, vienen y me jalan las orejas. Sí. Some moms and some dads are like, hey, can we talk a little bit more about this? Or and I listen, and I love them, and I am humble enough to say, hey, yes, sorry, I made the mistake. How do you think we could do it better? And they always have a voice. And I think you know this because before I came here, you also were part of the community. And these parents, I love the fact that they feel that CMS is part of their home.
Yes. They
come here, they tell us, they advocate, they value dual language education. So the gift of being an immigrant, a second language learner, and also truly, truly being more than happy to dedicate the rest of my life to this work, I think it gives families a sense of, I think I belong to where this leader is. So
yes, it's a great match. Perfect match. Couldn't be better.
Yeah, I'm completely in love with this community. My teachers, I have over 86% of my teachers are also immigrants.
Wow.
So there's a lot of visas and a lot of...
You're so fortunate to have teachers who want to be with our community, in this community, in their community, and to join you as a leader because you have embraced them and others, everyone throughout. You're so genuine, Nestor. You're so humilde, yet proud. It's a beautiful combination of leadership that you are willing to take chances and do what you need to do to get the resources, support, etc., amazing, talented teachers for your students, yet you also listen, and it's not about ego at all. I've never seen that with you, and that is just so, it's priceless.
Thank you. Yeah, I always tell my teachers that it is never my way, it's always the best way. So I do my homework, I put my best thinking into leadership, and then I put it on the table. And then let's take it apart, let's see what can be done better.
And they make it even better, don't they?
Every time, every time.
Yes.
It's just so beautiful. I have a couple of questions about your leadership. Going back to the 1,000 things that you have accomplished, always very a strong advocate for multilingual learners, for our minorities.
Yes.
And you've spent a good amount of your time as a professional serving those communities. I wonder if you can point at one single proudest accomplishment or one single proudest moment in your career where you can look back and say, gosh, this was so hard, but I am so glad we did it.
Well, here's one. There are probably many, but there's this one that stands out to me, Nestor, that I want to make sure that I share with you, and I think you're aware of this, but just in case. I brought the seal of biliteracy to the Denver Public Schools.
Yes.
And when I was the executive director of the multilingual department, I remember going to a conference, a CAVE conference, Colorado Association of Bilingual Education. And I remember a person, Jorge Garcia, talking about this seal of biliteracy, that was in California or somewhere. I think it started in California. And where students graduate from high school, and they actually have on their diploma this designation of you are a bilingual student. And this is going to get you opportunities, jobs. I mean, your Spanish or whatever language it is, by the way, it's many languages, can open more doors to your future. And I raised my hand and I said, we're going to do that in the Denver Public Schools. Now, I didn't have any plans yet. I just got so excited. I said, we're going to do that. And another colleague raised her hand out from the mountains from, I want to say Summit County. And she said, Jessica Martinez, she says, well, we're going to do it too. We'll do it with you. So I came back to the office and I said, we're going to bring the seal of biliteracy to the Denver Public Schools. And so we were the first ones in Colorado also, by the way.
Ah, okay.
Colorado and to Denver. So what I did is I reached my hand out to my friend Pat Urieta, who you know, who's a principal here.
Yes.
But she was there then in Commerce City, Adams 12. And I reached out to her and to her superintendent, Pat Sanchez, and I said, hey, do you all want to join us? We're going to start the Seal of Biliteracy here. Well, and let's do it together. So, Nestor, that kind of goes along with, yes, us, me, or us as a leader, and everybody else with us, right? I didn't want to be stingy about it. I thought it was so important to give our kids and their families this attribute, this plus, versus you're bilingual, you need that special help. No, our kids are bilingual, and they're really smart. They're amazing. So we all worked together for about 6 months or so, and we met on a regular basis, and we researched, what does this look like? How do we get it? How do we bring the Seal of Biliteracy to Denver and to their districts? And we did it together as a team. And I say to Denver Public Schools, because me and a team, I wasn't by myself. Myself and other people who worked with me in the department where I worked. And then, again, of course, my friend Pat Urieta, who was in Commerce City then to help the kids in Commerce City get it. And then my colleague up in the mountains. And so it was just such an honor. And I'm very proud of that because it's like all these things I did as a first grade bilingual teacher, as a bilingual resource teacher, as a principal who wrote my own letters in Spanish to parents, and that isn't even my first language, and I would really have to double check it with people, like, could you read my letter before it goes out, my bulletin to make sure it's correct, or my newsletter to parents in Spanish. I wanted to make sure it was correct. All those things that I did, to me, it was so important. It was like the pinnacle where all of a sudden we could then give our students and encourage people with their bilingualism, whether you are already bilingual when you come to Denver Public Schools or whether you're learning a new language. So we had children the first year, almost 200 kids the first year. Remember, you have to test at very high levels. Yeah. They have to test at the most advanced levels in the second language and in English. You have to pass all their English coursework. They have to kind of meet these extreme standards. And you should have seen the people, and they were not just Spanish speakers, but of course we had mostly Spanish speakers. We had kids from Russia. We had kids from other languages. And I'm also proud that the indigenous languages, some of the languages that aren't written, certain languages are only spoken. We made criteria so that people from their community could come and assess the student's ability to, do they really know the language that they're speaking or that they're saying that they're bilingual in? And they would let us know. We would have to work through the process of that. But that way, we also did, of course, for sign language. You want to make sure that all the kids were included. So that's really important to me. That would be the one.
Oh, my God. What a victory for DPS, because it goes to, again, going back to the idea of your identity and celebrating that beautiful gift you have. My wife is a school counselor in high school, and she always takes so much pride on the amount of kids that graduate with the Seal of Biliteracy. She gets them the little cords.
Yes, that's beautiful.
They have their endorsement on the back of their certificate.
Yes.
I took that idea for my elementary kids and my fifth graders who pass the test that we do for Spanish and English literacy proficiency, reading and writing and math and all those things. We do a little endorsement on their certificate as well.
I love that, Nestor. That's beautiful.
So when they go to middle school, they have their little thing, and it's so much pride. It's super cool. I guess I wanted to ask you about what is equity for you. And sounds kind of redundant because this entire conversation have been about how you lived your life personally and professionally to enact the value of equity. And with the fear of being redundant, I wonder if you could put into words who you are and what you believe equity to be.
So, Nestor, most of my life has been about advocating and fighting for our people, really, for us to have a place at the table. And not just a place, but to also lead at that table. So to me, equity is including other people at that table and not letting anyone dominate at that table. So, we all know that there's a difference between equal and equity, right? We want to make sure we get what we deserve and that we get the same opportunities or opportunities that will complement who we are as people. And that means talking to people about what that means for them. So when we've talked about all these things about family and community, I'm really glad you asked about equity, because to me, as a principal, as a district leader, both of us, we need to make sure that we know what our families want to understand what is equity to them too. And that we're not making decisions about what that is for them, so that when we're at those tables with them, or maybe it's them and it's not us anymore, or maybe it's them. Some of your mothers here, I've seen them. Some of the parents, they are the leaders at those tables. They are amazing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that this school was almost taken over to become a charter school, and they fought like heck and said, no, district, you're not going to turn us into a charter school. We are CMS, and we are a bilingual school. We're dual language school, and back off. And the district backed off. So to me, equity is including voices like the parents who were here and saying, absolutely, this is your school, this is your community, and we're here to honor that. So when we have a table of equity, what I want to make sure is people understand on that is it's not just for one color of group. It's for all of us. To me, that's equity, that we all get an opportunity in our own voice to say what we need, and someone isn't telling us what that is. Like, for example, equal is everybody gets a piece of candy, right? The same candy. Equitable is, well, we want the Mexican candy with the chile on it and the limon and the whatever it is we like. Or I like nuts. Maybe I want a candy with some nuts on it. So to me, that is, what is it that's right for the community, for the people, through their own voices, not through somebody telling us what is equity. Here you go, this is equity. So to me, it's a constant interpreting, constantly thinking about somebody saying that's equity, and I'm constantly thinking, no, that's not. And then saying something about that and doing something about that. To me, that's what we always need to do, to make sure that we live as leaders of equity, that we are always there to make sure we're guardians of equity. And that, to me, is what equity is.
That collective, continuous invitation to the table for you to share your voice, and then it's like a mosaic, a collage of voices from all backgrounds that build what we understand for equity. It's not somebody dictating, this is equity. That's very powerful. That's at the core of what we should do as well as leaders.
Amen.
What a pleasure to have you here.
It's been my pleasure. Nestor, I just want to thank you for your leadership, and today and forevermore, that leadership, because it will never end. It will be always growing.
Thank you.
And always beyond growing, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but beyond growing, it's beyond the stars. It's always, and you're always looking around at everybody else and making sure people are with you. You're the kind of leader that we need in our communities. And I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so honored to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual, and you are the kind of people that I look up to follow those footsteps. And many of the things that I have on my leadership are because of people like you.
Right back at you, Nestor. Thank you.
Before we wrap up this conversation, I wanted to just see if you have a final message for that young leader, for that kid finishing high school or maybe finishing college that wants to jump in and help the community just like you did for your whole life. What message would you have for them?
I would say, adelante. I would say, do it, believe in yourself. You can do it, you will do it, and there's nothing to stop you. Go for it.
Yeah, that courageous leadership that you have, that I really love, and that your kids have as well.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thank
I love
you,
you
Nestor.
very much, and I hope we can do
It's
this
mutual.
again in the future.
Thank you,
And I'm
Nestor.
grateful that you exist, and I'm grateful
God
for
bless you.
everything you've done.
God bless you. Thank you, Nestor, and I love you very, very much.
Thank you. Let's put this here.
It's mutual.
Can I give you a
Of course. I was going to ask.